Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Tensions escalate in India and Pakistan after India launches missile strikes in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. 133 cardinals from around the world begin casting their vote for a new pope in the largest ever conclave. And revealing regrets and the reason he stood down, former US President Joe Biden gives his first interview since leaving office. Now to our top story. Pakistan says 26 people have been killed and 46 injured in Indian airstrikes that hit sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. India launched the attacks overnight and said at least 10 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling on its side of the de facto border. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by international journalist and a broadcaster Inzamam Rashid and Wissam Kayrouz, editor at Al Arabiya. Once again, both of you, so much. Thank you for joining us. Inzi, we are actually going to speak to a Pakistan minister a little while later on the show. For now, give us the latest on the situation.
Well, look, it's been a tumultuous 24 hours across India and Pakistan. It was around this time, 24 hours ago, that India started its airstrike on Pakistan. They say it lasted for around 25 to 30 minutes. They say that they specifically tried to target terrorist hotspots, those areas where they believed Pakistan terrorist organizations were operating from. And as a result, they killed 26 people, leaving dozens more injured as well as a result. Pakistan saying that women and children were amongst the casualties as well. In retaliation, all day today, Pakistan have been saying that they will retaliate, that they will attack. They claim that they shot down 5 Indian fighter jets on the Indian side of the border, a huge victory for them that they say India disputes it. And as a result, on the Indian side, it's believed around 9 or 10 people have lost their lives. So a day of escalation across the very border, which has been difficult for many, many years now, and a day which doesn't really seem that much is calming down over the last 24 hours. The next 24 hours is what will be incredibly interesting.
Wissam agreed, the next 24 hours crucial in this point.
Yes, and at the same time, it's very clear that the ball now is in the territory of Pakistan. They have to orchestrate a certain answer that is below the line of conflict and above the line of feeding the narrative of their people, because, I mean, it's a very, very intense situation. But what is clear, though, is that internationally, there is no signal whatsoever from the great players in the world, especially from America and the UK, or even China, that any of these great powers is willing to take side. It's very clear the big powers are they want to make sure this ends up very quickly. Of course, it's a conflict that flares up seasonally every few years. But at the same time, we have a feeling now that as China is heavily involved in Pakistan, India has great relations with Trump administration. No one wants to see this go beyond the seasonal conflict.
And we just heard from Donald Trump again on this, haven't we?
Yes, Donald Trump speaking in the White House just recently, he's used the word stop several times. He wants to see this conflict come to an end. He said that he knows both of those nations very well. He's had visits from both of the previous prime ministers and of Narendra Modi to the White House as well. And he's basically saying stop this conflict. But he has also offered his hand in help as well. And he says, if any of the nations need my help, I'm willing to support. I think what is interesting when we look at wider world leaders as well, the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, has actually said, we don't want to see another war, basically. We've already got Russia-Ukraine going on.
Yes.
We've already got what's happening out here in the Middle East. We can't afford another escalation.
It could
between India and
even be
Pakistan.
potentially bigger. I mean, potentially, it could be even bigger than the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. At the same time, the very role of Pakistani and Indian population all around the world.
Yeah.
You know, the big players, you know, Rishi Sunak was UK Prime Minister, he's of Indian origins. You have a lot of people from India and Pakistan running the big companies in the world, and no one wants to see these two countries who have big soft power in the world get involved in such a big conflict. And this is really playing a role. And as you said, Donald Trump said, I'll be there, I'll be there. Donald Trump wants to say, I'm friends with both of you. Please, let's stop it as soon as possible.
But, you know, in the conversations that we're having, Kashmir seems to be the flashpoint here. Why is this region been so disputed for so long?
Well, this is it. Kashmir is a mountainous region in Pakistan and India, and it's been disputed ever since the partition of 1947. Both countries basically want ownership of the land of Kashmir, and unfortunately, it's the Kashmiri people who are stuck right at the center of the conflict between two nations. It's Kashmiris who bear the brunt of the ongoing conflict between India and Pakistan, and essentially they are the ones who want peace. It still begs the question whether Pakistan and India actually want de-escalation, actually want to come to the table and have a discussion together. That's the big question, and I don't really feel like those two sides do. It's the Kashmiris who want peace more than anyone.
And it's a very beautiful region.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. At the same time, I think that both countries invested so much in the narrative of war, the narrative of confrontation, that it becomes almost folkloric. That in Pakistan, people, they tell their children how great their army is. Same thing in India. So two countries who invested so much in the narratives of nationalistic, you know, patriotism.
Yeah.
It's hard to get into the next phase.
Yeah.
And sometimes they forget that somehow these two great countries, they come from somehow the same pool of culture. And this is...
I think what will be interesting, though, just picking up on the situation right now, is the next 24 hours. That's crucial and could very well be critical. And I think, as Wissam said earlier, the ball kind of is in Pakistan's court. Is what is their retaliation going to be? Is it going to be big enough that it appeases people? Is it going to be minuscule that India won't do an even bigger retaliation back to Pakistan?
It's a calibration game.
Yep.
They need to retaliate low enough not to initiate a big conflict and high enough to appease the very upset Pakistani population.
Yeah, it's going to be a really crucial 24 hours. But actually earlier I spoke to retired Commodore Titrapu Uday Buska, director at Society for Policy Studies in New Delhi. He told me India does not want to escalate the situation. Take a listen.
The message has been conveyed that if there is a terror strike of this nature, India will respond against the perpetrators and those who have supported it. India does not want to escalate. If there is any escalation, I would say that perhaps that choice will have to be made by Pakistan. Some very intemperate references have been made in Pakistan about the price they would make India pay. India is monitoring the situation. The security forces are prepared for exigencies. Personally, I would say I hope it doesn't happen.
So, Wissam, there we are. He was just speaking to me a little bit earlier. But we must remember that both India and Pakistan are nuclear-armed countries. And this is something that people are raising the alarm about. Do we know how many they possibly have in their arsenal, and could it escalate to this stage?
They are very similar in terms of how many warheads they have. 170 for India, 172 for India, or 70 for Pakistan. And some estimations would say that Pakistan, they have a bit higher, maybe closer to 200. But that is not the most determining factor. India is bound by an accord in which India agrees it will never start using nuclear weapons as the first. On the other side, Pakistanis, they allow themselves in their military doctrine to start their tactical hit in case they feel threatened. Although they are both nuclear, but the fact that they are both nuclear, this is the guarantee that no nuclear confrontation will happen. And let's not forget, they are not isolated. They are in the middle of a very, very intense geopolitical region with China as a big player. And also, you know, America is everywhere. So there is no real sense of urgency in matter of nuclear confrontation, but in the same time, this is what makes this conflict very interesting. This is why we are talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
And those threats have been around for a long time from either side. You know, the finger has been metaphorically hovering over the nuclear button for a long time between these two nations. And like Wissam said, I don't think it will ever be hit. However, it's the threat and the dialogue which makes this conflict so interesting.
And it's part of the narrative. I mean, they are two nuclear powers. They are so proud of being two nuclear powers. But will that happen? We don't know. But we know that in India, people in charge are the politicians. And in Pakistan, people in charge are the people or the army. I don't know.
Either or.
Either or. But yeah, that was a really great chat. And as we did say, we will have that information minister on the show a little bit later on. And obviously, I'll definitely get your reactions to that interview. But stay right there. And we're actually going to move on to something else. I think we're going to move on to the conclave. And we have some news out of the Vatican. Black smoke has emerged at the Vatican, indicating no pope has been elected. There will now be another vote, and conclave will have no communication with the outside world until a new pope is elected. Okay, so there we are, Inzi, black smoke. Should we be surprised, Wissam? What do you guys think?
No, I think it was probably expected, right? I think that's what been maybe 2-3 hours that they've been voting, has it?
Yeah, I mean, if we had white smoke by now, that would be a very big story.
Yes.
Although personally, I don't believe white smoke will be very far from. I mean, because there is a sense of urgency in the Catholic Church that they have to get into a place where things are appeased. But in the same time, one light story to tell, they made sure this time that black smoke is very clear black smoke and white smoke is very clearly white smoke, because there has been some confusion the last time.
I always remember last time I was watching it and there was kept on being grey smoke and it was really confusing. So I'm glad that they'll sort that out.
I wonder what they've put inside to...
chemicals.
Oh, have they put chemicals?
Yeah.
There we are. Yeah. They're modernising the smoke. We can move on that way. But, Inzi, what's amazing, and I just think as the level of secrecy when it comes to a conclave, it's steeped in tradition. The Vatican puts so many things in place. It's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And what I've loved as well over the last few days, we've seen many journalists outside around the Sistine Chapel and around the Vatican trying to actually grab the attention of some of the cardinals as they come and go. And they remain so tight-lipped. They don't say a single word. I think maybe a cardinal from East Asia maybe spoke to some of the press, but a majority of them say tight-lipped, don't say anything. And the secrecy, especially now they've actually gone in to start the voting, is just brilliant, because the story of secrecy means that they have to keep their mouths shut about whatever goes on in this time until they die.
It's amazing, isn't it? And in the age of social media, I think they've all put their last post up, haven't they? And they've gone into the secrecy now, Wissam. But many are saying this is the most inclusive, but also the most divisive conclave. Tell us more.
Let's not forget first then that the biggest voter in this election, so-called election, is the Pope Francis himself, because he has appointed somewhere like 80% of the current voters. This is something very notable. So we would believe that many of those he brought into the pool of electors are people somehow, not exclusively, who are within his school of thought. But at the same time, what's not to like or to follow in such a colored, full of codes, full of great. I mean, they are voting in one of the most beautiful rooms in the world, the Sistine Chapel. They are voting under the paintings of Michelangelo.
Yeah, I don't know how they're not distracted. And
I know, right? Yeah.
the whole time.
They are
Must
so
be
used
pretty
to it.
amazing things to
But
see.
at the same time, and I have personally met recently with some non-voting cardinals who were very sure that somehow these voters, the cardinals, will be keen on choosing someone who will appease the internal rifts in the Catholic Church. Let's not forget that the Pope Francis is a very assertive Pope. He has done a lot of very audacious decisions. It might look liberal, welcomed by the world, but inside the Church, he wasn't the Pope of the Church as much he was the Pope of the non-Catholics. At the same time, those cardinals, they say that they would believe that the best way forward for the Church now is to go into a papacy of appeasement, a papacy, maybe a transitional papacy, where things are back to normal, back to a middle ground, back to where all the very divisive questions are not really, confronted up front.
I think that's interesting because my kind of counter-argument to that would be, I feel as if Pope Francis was, Pope of the people, as many people have said. And so, yes, he's appeased a lot of people within the Catholic community and wider communities around the world. It's whether has he pleased the other cardinals who are now voting in this very important vote, and will they then align with his kind of views and the way that he led the Catholic Church? I think he appeased a lot of the people out there, but has he appeased the people who are now...
Or influence the cardinals who will now vote for him?
Well, now every cardinal has the freedom to choose whatever he wants. But at the same time, it's an institution of people. They are human beings. There are politics there. There are clans. There are also nationalities. Let's not forget this myth about the Italians who still have a big pool of cardinals. And Cardinal Parolin, who is frontrunner, as some would say, is Italian, is in the middle, is close to Pope Francis. This is why and he is the one who could get the church into a place of balance. But at the same time, the Italian press, imagine, has been talking about conspiracies. Like one of these most crazy conspiracies is that France and President Macron organized a meeting at the Palazzo Farnese, which is the embassy of France in Rome, beautiful place, where he got into some of the cardinals who are within the most liberal line, and those cardinals are in line with a greater group of people called the San Egidio group. This is the most significant liberal group within the church. And those Italian media people were saying that the French president was organizing some kind of lobbying to get the cardinals of San Egidio who are liberal. One of them is Matteo Zuppi, an Italian, and another one is the Bishop of Marseille, who is French. So I don't believe this is true, but what I believe is that someone is trying to sabotage Zuppi and the French.
You'd think that Macron's probably got a bit more on his plate in his own country.
I know, but
selecting a pope.
I was just thinking when you were talking there, we talk about elections around the world and voters to be a new president, but I actually think this could be one of the biggest votes happening right now in the world. If we do think about it, it's the head of the Catholic Church. Millions of people support the Catholic Church all around the world. Billions.
1.4 billion. I mean, also, even though not all Christians are Catholics, but in general, I mean, the Pope is a figure for the Christians who are somewhere like 2.3, 2.4 billion. So it's big. At the same time, it's also ceremonial. It's folkloric. It's like the Queen of England.
Of course.
I mean, it's something that appeals to the world. Yeah. It's something that has a huge load of history. I mean, look at the Vatican.
I mean, it is very similar to the Queen of England in one sense, because whilst Buckingham Palace would say that, the Queen and King aren't political and,
Soft
they don't
power.
have... it is that soft power role. And I think that is exactly the same with the Pope, especially with Pope Francis. He was very vocal about ongoing wars and tensions increasing. He was very vocal about that. And so there is a slight element of politics that comes under wearing that papal hat and carrying all the regalia with it.
At the same time, we are in a very polarized world on the religious level. Religions, they count much more in 2025 than they counted in 1975.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Religion is a big question in the world, whether it is for good reasons or for bad reasons. And such an event is important to the world, important to how communities will live together. Especially, let's not forget that the future of the Catholic Church itself is not really in Europe or in the West. It's happening in Africa, where it's growing most. It's happening in South America. It's happening in countries like the Philippines. And Pope Francis' legacy is about understanding that the center of gravity of religiosity and of the Catholic Church has moved long time ago from Europe. And one new player in the game is America, the United States, which somehow turned from being the biggest Protestant country in the world to a country where Catholics are the biggest Christian group and where the church gets most of its funding.
It's absolutely amazing. But I do think just part of this, one final thought, is US President Donald Trump has really brought religion back into the fore with his presidency. So I wonder, are we changing slightly when it comes to politics and religion? There's a whole lot bigger conversation here, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a big part of his election campaign. Obviously, in recent days, there's a picture of him wearing the Pope regalia and all that kind of stuff, which he said that was made by
hilarious.
AI.
It was hilarious.
It was very funny. But on that point, when you look back at whether more people are turning to religion, whether we are becoming a more religious world. I mean, there is actual fact around that. In the UK, there was a survey done recently where it showed that there are more people attending church, there are more people turning to Catholicism as well. And actually, that's happening within younger men. And the wider question is why is that happening? Maybe in a place like UK, people are a bit more disenfranchised, they're not happy with the economy, the kind of knock-on effects of Brexit and where people actually turn to, and maybe young men are just trying to find a bit of a home that they can kind of go to. But this is clearly something that's happening across the world as well, so that'll be an interesting shift to see.
André Malraux, a great French writer from the 20th century, he wrote in the 60s, he said the 21st century will be spiritual or won't be. And I think it's a prophecy somehow. And to see that after a century where secularism was the new norm, to be in a world where religion is counting more than ever. But at the same time, it's the mixing of people thanks or because of the immigration, where people in the West who have been into secularism for so long are confronted with a new wave of immigrants who come with a big load of spirituality and religiosity. So it brings back also a question of identity. So people who are from Europe would say, okay, those young people coming to join us in our country, they are religious. They belong spiritually, religiously. Do we have some? I would do the same. Do I have some kind of religious identity? And this is where they could try to pick and choose. Sometimes they find the bad influencers, but sometimes they are back to what they have learned or their family religiosity.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely fascinating. Like you said, it is young men. The demographic, I actually didn't realise that it's between about 18 and 24. And I do wonder if it is this big shift we're seeing in the world with immigration, with people sort of the cost of living crisis. There seems to be so much happening, and a lot of people are probably pinning their hopes on religion in many respects.
And very quickly, probably just a little bit of influence from Pope Francis as well. At the end of the day, this was a pope who was, very open to a lot of, different cultures, very inclusive. He brought in a lot of diversities, which traditional Catholic popes would not, traditional popes would not necessarily invite into the circle. But he did that, and perhaps he opened the door to more people stepping into becoming more religious.
And that has been such an interesting chat. I feel like that could have been a whole show, but we're going to move on right now to our next
We'll wait
story.
for white smoke.
Yeah, we'll wait for that white smoke. And we are going to Washington. And former US President Joe Biden has given his first interview since stepping down. During his chat with the BBC to mark the 80th anniversary of VE Day, Biden spoke about his decision to leave office, the ongoing Ukraine war, and his thoughts on President Putin. Take a quick listen.
Listen to what Putin said when he talked about going from Kyiv into Ukraine. He can't stand the fact that the Russian dictatorship that he runs, that the Soviet Union has collapsed. And anybody thinks he's going to stop is just foolish. And the way we talk about now that, well, it's the Gulf of America. Maybe we're going to have to take back Panama. Maybe we need to acquire Greenland. Maybe Canada should be. What the hell's going on here? What president ever talks like that? That's not who we are. We're about freedom, democracy, opportunity, not about confiscation.
There we are. Inzi, a blast from the past. Joe Biden. We know he was always going to criticize Donald Trump to some extent, and the administration, of course. But what did you make of what he actually had to say during this interview?
You had to concentrate because it was very slow. It took a bit of time, really, to get into topics sometimes. It must have been very difficult for Nick Robinson, who's doing the interview, because they would have had to wade through a lot of footage with Biden talking the way he did. However, he spoke about Trump, which, of course, was going to happen. He spoke about his first 100 days in office. I think the words were, "I don't see anything triumphant." He said that he would let history judge his successor. He also said that he didn't think that Trump would succeed in flouting the courts or the law. He thinks that Republicans themselves are actually waking up to what Trump is about. So, of course, he was never going to be nice about Donald Trump and his first 100 days in office. But I also don't think he was overly critical. I think, for a former president who essentially lost the race to Donald Trump, I think he was quite measured in what has been a whirlwind 100 days for Donald Trump.
Yes, Wissam, agreed?
Did he lose the race?
Well,
he didn't. I mean, it's Kamala Harris who did. I mean, for him, there's somewhere, I mean, he is bitter. Definitely, he is bitter, but relieved in the same time. I think he would say, I mean, I'm not the one who lost. I'm not the loser here. And I always said that if someone can win against Donald Trump, it's going to be me. You didn't want me. But at the same time, if you contemplate Joe Biden in this interview and think for a while that he won the presidency, he is, and compare him with the dynamic Donald Trump.
The energy.
The energy of Donald Trump. So basically, yes, he is. But at the same time, we feel that he lost on a bitter note. I mean, when Barack Obama finished his 2 terms, and then you had Hillary Clinton who lost, it's almost the same thing. But Barack Obama could be in a different place in history where he feels, more happy.
In some ways, when I watched that interview, I actually felt quite sorry for Biden in many ways. He's clearly slowed down, but he had such an illustrious political career, 50 years, let's think about that for a moment. But another thing is, where's he left the Democrats right now? They don't seem to be doing much. I don't know if they can do much because Donald Trump is dominating the headlines, but, what next?
Well, I think the big question is whether the kind of last-minute handover to Kamala Harris impacted the Democrats in that election. And in all honesty, I don't really think it did. I think what Democrats say now is that handover basically gave Donald Trump the key to the White House. But I truly believe that whether he was there or whether Kamala Harris was there, I think the election was going to go the way that it went. The question is now is how do the Democrats get up from the mess that one has left them in, and Kamala Harris, who was only seen for the first time just very recently as well, has left them in. What work are they actively doing to try and rebuild a party whilst Donald Trump is literally there in
Is the party.
Is the party. He's having the party.
He's the show, he's the party, he's
but this
monopolizing
is
the
how
headlines.
American politics works. The two parties are just empty shells who are waiting for someone to come and take over them. This is what George Bush was, this is what Reagan was, and this is mostly what Trump is, and even more aggressively because Trump is the party now. On the other side, the very fact that we had this confusion and we had Joe Biden leave at the last moment or last month is because there is a problem in the dynamics of the Democratic Party. But at the same time, as you said, we didn't feel Biden was very defensive of his legacy when it came to Zelensky, of Ukraine. But was he really the counter voice of Donald Trump as some in his party would expect him to be? No.
No.
Why? Because he doesn't have a counter narrative. He doesn't have a counter offer because he's too old and because the party doesn't have another program. They only could say that Trump is doing very bad, and a lot of people would say this, but is it enough?
And he probably actually knew and knows that Trump probably does have a better relationship with those world leaders than he did during his time in office, or probably during any of his time as a politician. And he's probably subtly with himself admitted that the guy's got a better relationship and he's got better dialogue with those people that I never had.
And I would argue, that somehow they are against the policies of Donald Trump. But maybe deep inside, some of the people in the Democratic camp are saying, maybe this guy, the bold moves he is taking on the tariffs, maybe it's worth a shot. And let's see where it gets. Maybe there is this thinking also. If he fails, it will fail. And if he wins, someone would have broken the ceiling. And this is interesting for the world.
And I actually think that's what a lot of the American people voted for. They voted for change. They voted for Donald Trump to see these dramatic shifts. And we are seeing it play out in real time. And I also think Donald Trump has got so much energy. I think he's 79, isn't he?
Yeah.
And if you just look at him in comparison to Joe Biden, gosh, he's so busy. I couldn't keep up with him, and I'm significantly younger.
But the thing is, he doesn't seem to be letting up, right? He's just signed with a talent agency, potential...
This is Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, the potential rumours of him, maybe kind of working on a book or something like that. If I was him, I would just chill out now. You've done your stint. You've had an illustrious career. OK, you had a bit of a sharp downfall, but just relax now. Take your time out, and you've not got long left. Just take it easy.
One of the greatest things that occurred to me during the fight, the elections, is that...
The fight,
The fight.
When he had his first failed debate with Trump, and they were asking the opinions of people, and of course all the people were saying that Trump won, except people who speak Spanish and who were listening to the translation. They thought that Biden won because the problem of Biden is not the message. It's how he is saying the message. It's himself, his person. And at the same time, let's not forget, he is a fox. He's a very intelligent fighter. He's a great politician. He has been in the Congress for 50 years. He has been vice president for 8 years and president for 4 years. He's one of the people who will mark the future of America more than anyone else. And he is the biggest player in the Russia-Ukraine war.
I'd finally just be interested whether actually any world leaders out there really care what Biden has said in this interview with the BBC. Will they actually be watching it and thinking, oh yeah, I agree with him or I support him and that's a good point that he's made? I don't think many world leaders will be watching that and will be that bothered about what he's had to say.
If Obama had the same interview, maybe people would listen more.
That's a fair point.
And I think maybe other world leaders think things have moved on so quickly in the Trump 100 days that maybe Biden, whatever he says
It
right
looks
now,
essentially.
yeah, they're like, it's insignificant. Things are
Old news.
Yeah, old news. You know, we've got a lot more in our in trade to deal with. But we've reached that point in our show where Inzi and Wissam, you've come up with a couple of quirky stories of the day. So, Inzi, let's talk about Cristiano Ronaldo's son. He's following in his father's footsteps. And of course, he's a footballer.
Of course he is, yeah. Cristiano Ronaldo Jr., who's been dribbling the ball around just like his father. There's no doubt that he's, had a ball at his feet ever since he was born. 14 years old, and he's at Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia with his father, who signed for the Pro League back in December 2022. He has now been called up to the Portugal under-15 squad for the first time. So obviously a very proud moment in the Ronaldo household. And I think, the question around this is whether, has he worked hard for it? Has he put in the effort? Or has he got that position because he is the son of Cristiano Ronaldo? I think in the case of sports stars, it's very different because you have to show results.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to show your fitness. You have to show that you are capable to be at that very top level. But the wider question is our kind of Nepo babies, do they deserve the spot that they potentially get, when it comes to films or other industries?
Sometimes I'd like to say no, but I think a lot of the world would disagree with me that everyone with talent should be given the opportunity.
That's a fair point.
I mean, the boy is privileged, of course.
Of course.
Even before he gets into any achievement, he is privileged. Media is following. There are videos viral on social media where Georgina, Cristiano Ronaldo's girlfriend, tells him, you have to go to school tomorrow. It happened last week. And people with the millions are watching this video. He is under spotlight. Now, what he can make out of it, this is another story.
Yeah.
But I mean, having a father or mother who are that famous and influential, of course, it's a privilege.
I have watched him.
Acceptable.
Yeah, well, I've watched a few videos, and he does actually seem like a very good, talented footballer. He's clearly got the genes of his father to play that sport. And I think it will be interesting to see if he goes on and can be as good as his father. I think you always find that doesn't usually happen.
No, it doesn't, does it? Like, we see this with a lot of famous people's children.
Yeah.
We were speaking about it earlier, like Madonna, how famous she was. And we think about even Donald Trump, his children have all kind of followed in his footsteps, but they never seem to quite reach that stardom of their parents.
I had a couple down, Will Smith and his kids, Jaden and Willow. What happened to them? That's the question, what happened to them? And there was a great quote that I saw of an interview with Lily Rose Depp, the daughter of the film actor Johnny Depp. She said, maybe you get your foot in the door, but you still just have your foot in the door. There's a lot of work that comes after that. I don't know what work she's put in because she's a terrible actress. And so I'm not entirely sure what work she's put in.
I must admit something, she must be so bad I've never watched one of her films. But it is interesting, isn't it? We can all get our foot in the door, but it's what you do once you get in there.
But maybe Cristiano Ronaldo's style and legacy is about discipline, okay? This man didn't have a golden spoon. This man is now 40 years old, one of the most fit athletes in the world, because he is disciplined. I would expect that the way he raised his child is somehow within this mentality of discipline.
The way he was raised.
The way he was raised. So in sports, yes, it's about discipline. And I see that he has a very good family environment. But does anyone really want his mother or his father to be that famous? I'm not sure. Because at the end of the day, it is not about fame. It's about having a father and a mother. And inside the home, it's different.
I would like them to have the money of
of
a white person, but maybe not be completely famous.
What we do know is that he's going to have the best football boots on that pitch.
Yes.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It is a great story, though, and, why not? Let the kids have a go. And Wissam, some good news from your story. European beaches has seen a significant drop in litter. I'm really happy about the story.
Yes, let's talk about European beaches. All the, very fancy and famous people who go to Spain, to south of France. And apparently since 2015, there is a very significant drop in littering. It goes to 30% and 40% when you count the plastic waste. Why did it happen? One theory is that people are more aware and municipalities and authorities are more strict. But at the same time, let's not forget that there was a huge wave of anti-foreigners on the beach. Maybe it's not related, but it's worth contemplating that at the same time, these so inviting beaches have been, at the same time, the land or the place where so many people came to say, we don't want to see foreigners on our beaches. But there is still something so unique and attractive about the European beaches. Maybe it's the tan, the European
I always
tan.
think that. I don't know why, but you were asking me where the best beaches, and I was like, they're not necessarily in Europe, but the best tan I've ever get is in Europe, and I don't know
The
why.
Mediterranean glow, that's
Always,
what they call it,
yeah. It's
I get
amazing.
tan there as well, quite
And it's always
often.
a really nice colour.
Yeah, it is
so
interesting.
it's all about the Mediterranean glow.
There's some interesting photos that we just displayed on the screen there of people actually picking up litter. And I wonder whether actually there are more kind of groups out there who are a bit more active, active groups who want to go out there, pick litter off these beaches as well, are just a bit more active when it comes to, collecting litter off the beach, being a bit more sustainable, working, towards the environment. And I think there has been a big shift in that. We've seen with kind of a lot of protests in the UK.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
With climate change protesters. And I wonder whether there are people just being a bit more conscious and groups coming together and working together to keep our beaches a bit cleaner and tidier.
And it's interesting because I'm a really keen scuba diver, and every time I go down and dive, one thing we all do is we take like a bag that we can put in our wetsuit and we collect as much as we can from the bottom of the sea. And every time I go down there, it's incredible the volume of litter and rubbish
In the sea.
in our oceans.
What's the craziest thing you found?
Like a sparkly top, because and straws and like party hats. Because if you think about it, people go on these big yachts for big parties, and it's all that confetti and like straws and T-shirts and things you wouldn't think about, but that's all down there.
Apparently, it's the fishing nets that are the most dangerous.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even the most skeptical people with climate change, people who don't believe in the climate change, even those people who want to keep pumping gas in the air, they want to see clean beaches and they want to see a clean sea, because there is something about everyone's interest in it. Who doesn't love to be in a sea where things are clean and proper? And to be back to Europe, this is a very old fantasy of people from Northern Europe who had, grey weather all the time and wanted to have these beaches on the Mediterranean, sunny and beautiful and inviting for the summer. We are still in this dynamic, and let's not forget that in the Mediterranean, exactly, this is where most of the fancy places are still there, most of the big parties, and especially most of the big fancy yachts. They are all in the Mediterranean.
It's very true.
But we're actually going to return to our top story because we're hoping to speak to the minister soon, and this is regarding the conflict between India and Pakistan. And to remind you, Pakistan says 26 people have been killed and 46 injured in Indian airstrikes that hit sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. India launched the attacks overnight and said at least 10 civilians were killed by Pakistani shelling on its side of the de facto border. So, Inzi, we've still got a lot to discuss when it comes to this story, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier. We're hoping to speak to the information minister. We're just waiting on him at the moment. And as we said, it's a crucial 24 hours ahead, really.
Yeah, it really is. And we've had this discussion where does the ball lie, in whose court? And after what happened 24 hours ago with India's attack on Pakistan, inside administered Pakistan, Kashmir, but also in the country of Pakistan as well, the question is, how far does Pakistan go? What's their red line in terms of a retaliation? It will be very interesting to hear from the minister, to hear what he's got to say, and to also get a sense of where Pakistan is sitting right now. Because, yes, they want to attack. They don't want to go overboard, so India retaliates with even more firepower. But also they don't want to do something subtle, which then doesn't appease the wider population. And I think that they've got to play a very fine game there.
Absolutely. Would you agree with that, Wissam? What's your assessment at the moment?
Of course, this is exactly the name of the game. It's how you calibrate a retaliation that does not start a conflict, but that appeases the population. But it's clear after we heard Trump speaking, moments ago, that there is a huge pressure on everyone involved not to let this escalate, not to let this lead into a conflict, because this is potentially very dangerous and it will drag in players in the region, most notably China, and no one wants to see this.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting 24 hours, as you did say. And I'm afraid it doesn't look like we'll be getting the minister, but hopefully we'll be able to speak to him at some point in the future. But I just wanted to say once again that thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to today's guest, international journalist and broadcaster Inzamam Rashid, and Wissam Kayrouz, editor at Arabiya. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Tensions escalate in India and Pakistan after India launches missile strikes in Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Black smoke emerges from the Vatican as 133 cardinals from around the world begin casting their vote for a new pope in the largest ever conclave. And regrets and why he stood down. Former US President Joe Biden gives his first interview since leaving office and revealing regrets and the reason he stood down. From former US President Joe Biden gives his first interview, and we did discuss that, of course, a little bit earlier. And that's all from us on W News Extra. G&T with Tom Burgess Watson is coming up next. Goodbye, and thank you so much for joining us.